And then I said, looper, I barely know her. Now, I know I've talked about loops in games before. Last time, Crystal Chang and I explored the pacing of the process, how to chain along these simple cycles of play so objectives are revealed in a way that expands the depth of the world you're in. What we didn't go over was how to iterate on those loops. Games have very simple base loops, and some of them strip all of your progress away and drop you right back at the beginning. How do you make the same basic action remain engaging over and over again, especially over a longer period of time? Well, wouldn't you know it? That's exactly what we're talking about. Today's video is all about taking a close look at the subtle ways game developers modify the looped play experience to keep players engaged. For all intents and purposes, the loop is the core of a game. Every experience players have stems from that central loop. For example, from the simple experience of jumping, Super Mario Bros. Was able to build an expansive game where simply pressing the A button was exciting enough to loop and sustain for 35 years. Now, if I want to be more accurate, jumping would be more akin to a toy in game dev terminology. That's something I didn't know when I was talking out of my butt 2 years ago, but whatever. What does it even mean to be a toy in a game? Well, it means that there's a system in the game that acts as a toy does. It's literally the action figure you played with as a kid. The toy itself isn't very complicated. The He-Man toy only has one articulation point at his shoulder so you can swing his axe, but with their imagination, kids can create scenarios based on the simple mechanics available. The toy acts as a conduit for kids to play for hours. Oh no, the evil green Power Ranger's going to take over the world. Good news is He-Man can stop him. Ba ba ba, ba ba ba. I did this for hours as a kid. And I don't mean this in a negative way at all, but game developers will apply the same practice while making their games. As game dev Katie Charonis puts it, under what conditions would a player want to play with this toy 1,000 times? Usually, giving the toy context and presenting players with possible goals, i.e. apply the toy to do X, and then expecting the player to improve over time, mastery. And it's that last part of Charonis' statement that's the big focus of the video. Iteration, the subtle shift in a process that changes the experience over time. Sometimes that can be achieved by adding complexity to the game or by making subtle adjustments that recontextualize the experience. In a turn-based JRPG, for example, the iteration is felt in the raw numbers output. You get that level up ding, the number goes up and you feel that dopamine rush. And from there, hey, what's just one more level? Hell yeah, new attack.
Oh god. Oh god.
The numbers provide clear markers for progression. However, in roguelikes like Spelunky, the numerical power scaling isn't there. Oftentimes when you restart that loop, you start in the same place and there's nothing different about it. But instead of seeing numbers going up on a stat screen, we see the numbers going up right here. Ow, player growth. Through consistent failures and eventually successes, players can master the toolset given to them. And these two progression systems don't have to be separate. Roguelites, such as Hades, will include RPG progression elements to aid in that brutal roguelike structure. They even go so far as to integrate the narrative and themes into the roguelike looping style. With all of these concepts in mind, you can take the simple premise like hit monster make hat and launch a massive franchise. By iterating thoughtfully on a simple toy, games can build up complicated play experiences with lots of variety that always feels true in the themes presented in those initial concepts. And when I say lots of variety, I mean lots of variety. Bottom line, the loop exists as a way to bring in new ideas while simultaneously reinforcing the foundation of what that game is. Even if the game throws a million bajillion points of inflection at you, there's a simple comforting concept that grounds the identity of that experience. It's like a stand-up comedian going up on stage to introduce new ideas and jokes, but then bringing it back to their classic punchline. Looper, I barely know her. Now, I know I've talked about loops in games before. Last time, I explored how to iterate on those loops. How do you make the same basic action remain engaging over and over again? Obviously, the loops will change as you progress. No need for tutorializing concepts that players are already familiar with. Even if it's just once or twice, well-designed loops are generally simple enough that you can jump right into the meat and potatoes again pretty easily. In a turn-based JRPG, for example, the iteration is felt in the raw numbers output. You get that level up ding, the number goes up and you feel that dopamine rush. And from there, hey, what's just one more level? Not every level up will be a notable milestone that unlocks a new skill, but they don't need to be. The slow rise in numbers can be a drip feed of serotonin if done right. It's also related to the concept of a Skinner box, but I don't want to get into that right now, we're just focusing on loops today. In roguelikes like Spelunky, the numerical power scaling isn't there. Oftentimes when you restart that loop, you start in the same place and there's nothing different about it. If it is, it's generally a subtle addition. But instead of seeing numbers going up on a stat screen, you see the numbers going up right here. Ow, player growth. Through consistent failures and eventually successes, players can master the toolset given to them. But hey, sometimes you just need a little bit of randomness to spice up the iteration as well. It's not a total raw XT I love waffles type of random, but a carefully calculated one. If you're building a linear experience, it can be fine-tuned to a T. But randomness requires developers to consider lots of variables, because what if instead of A, B, and C, you have A, B, and XD I love waffles? Tweaks need to be considered that would allow for A and B to work with both C and XD I love waffles, and in a way that doesn't compromise either experience. Speaking broadly, the randomness is almost always an external force, but can be utilized to convey a bunch of different intentions. In Pokemon, the random spawn rates establish an ecosystem, with a mix of some Pokemon frolicking everywhere and others being rare species. It makes the world feel diverse. Whereas in Hades, the random spawns and events will make the encounters synergize in different ways, creating unique scenarios that the player has to overcome. Anyways, as long as the basic loop is rock solid, the randomness will push players to keep on their toes while still remaining tonally succinct. There might be some wild escalations and danger, but players will always be able to find comfort in elements that they've already experienced. Something reliable to turn to, like the time I said, "Looper, I barely know her." Now, I know I've talked about loops in games before, and if you're coming back around and watching this one again, I hope that there's been some added perspective that will change the context of what I'm saying. Maybe after experiencing a game's loops so many times, you've attained a level of mastery and can now optimize each interaction with the system to make parts of it fly by even faster than when you started. Unfortunately, not all games will allow you to express your mastery over the system sheerly due to statistical limitations. In a turn-based JRPG, for example, the iteration is felt in the raw numbers output. You get that level up ding, the number goes up, and you feel that dopamine rush. And from there, hey, what's just one more level? Hey, I think we're evolving soon.
Oh god. Oh god.
The numbers provide clear markers for progression, and games with strong awareness for that development sometimes go that extra step and offer good points of reflection so that you can appreciate just how far you've come.
Oh hell yeah. Bow. That's satisfying.
However, in roguelikes like Spelunky, the numerical power scaling isn't there. Oftentimes when you restart that loop, you start in the same place and there's nothing different about it. If it is, it's generally a subtle addition. Not always, but usually. But instead of seeing numbers going up on a stat screen, you see the numbers going up right here. Ow. Player growth. Through consistent failures and eventually successes, players can master the toolset given to them, and these two progression systems don't have to be separate. Roguelites, such as Hades, will include RPG progression elements to aid in that brutal roguelike structure. They even go so far as to integrate the narrative and themes into the roguelike looping style. It's a slow burn method of storytelling that allows you to have this robust connection to characters even when your interactions with them are pretty brief. Anyways, even with so much to work with, games generally aren't played ad infinitum. Iterations have their limits. The resonance of the positive feedback stops, and the players run out of thrill in playing the game, whether that be expressed in a level cap, or by a player reaching a level of satisfaction in their mastery over a game. The enthusiastic drive to reach the next level just isn't there anymore, and that's not a bad thing. The games as a service model that we've been seeing for a while want you to play their games for as long as possible. And while that's a whole mess of discussion all on its own, I think it's fine to end something when you're satisfied with it. Thanks again and again and again for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to loop her. I barely know her. Alright, I'm done. Okay. We're in the end slate now. I think the video's done. Unfortunately, I don't think you've escaped the curse of Startown yet. In order to do that, you have to like, comment, subscribe. If you haven't done that already, I don't know why you haven't. Be sure to do that, otherwise, you're gonna be stuck in this video forever. Thanks again and have a good day.